Good afternoon. My name is Michael Marsh, and today I will be presenting a project that explores Chaos Group's new V-Ray real-time software as a tool for manipulating a viewer's emotional perception of a virtual environment. The first mood I chose as a driver for this project was whimsicality, as evidenced by this photograph of three dangling, synchronized painters, perfectly matching the ornamental trim that they are painting. My strategy for employing this mood involved accentuating the qualities of humor and color, synchronizing occurrences, and employing shadows as an additional range of characters. The second mood I chose was sorrow, as embodied in this haunting photograph by James Nachtwey of a young boy amidst the ruins of Grozny in Chechnya. My strategy for developing a similar psychological state in this project was to employ harsh shadows to achieve a quasi-film noir quality, desaturating colors, and using untamed organic growth to emphasize a sense of abandonment. My final governing principle was the state of transcendence, and is demonstrated in this photograph by Song Leon of a vacant roofscape in the Shanxi province. Here I wanted to mimic the qualities of disappearing horizon lines, an alarming lack of occupancy, and a bold and noble use of surfaces and materials to emphasize a sense of timelessness and permanence. As the subject of my investigation, I chose Pierre Koenig's Case Study House 21. Case Study House 21 predates Koenig's much more recognizable Case Study House 22, which has become an icon of California modernism through the photographs of Julius Schulman. The house was originally built to be a prototype of low-cost, modern post-war housing, but was ironically recently sold at auction for a record-setting $4 million. As such, I found its reluctant artifact quality to be a fitting subject for an investigation that would take a virtual environment through a range of manipulations of perception. The project is based on the premise that two variables affect the way that occupants perceive the spaces they inhabit. Environmental conditions encompass all changes that occur extrinsically to the viewer. These include lighting, atmospheric conditions, and tangible occurrences or events within the context. Psychological conditions encompass all variables that are intrinsic to the viewer, such as their own mood, the lens through which they would choose to see, and the objects that garner their attention. Case Study House 21 acts as a mechanism for moderating a gradient between privacy and exposure, primarily through the manipulation of glass doors and the surrounding lighting conditions, which either reveal or conceal the activities within. My strategy for exploring these subtle shifts between varying moods was to establish a fixed camera path, which navigated around and through the house on a 24-hour lighting sequence, so that a viewer can experience the effect of each modified parameter through the full lighting conditions sequence of a given day and night. These varying conditions can be understood as falling within three larger categories. First, as dawn breaks, the glass doors are closed, creating strong glass reflections and a maximum of privacy for the inhabitants. Next, at mid-afternoon, the glass doors are opened, but exposure is obscured through shadow and external glare. Lastly, during evening hours, the house is lit from within, resulting in maximum exposure of the occupants to the outside world. Each of these events is explored through the fixed camera track. The range of psychological conditions will be explored by the user primarily through the manipulation of lighting intensity and shadows, HDRI environment, presence or lack thereof of sun in the view, color of interior lights, and use of props or manipulations of furnishing colors. Normally we would be networking with other computers, and this window would update much faster, but today we're navigating with just a single machine, and therefore we'll only be implementing one or two of the psychological strategies for each of our three moods. The first mood we'll tackle is that of whimsicality. I've chosen a rather cartoonish HDRI environment, which provides cool, even lighting with playfully exaggerated clouds. Most of the materials in the project are of a rather restrained palette, so let's explore how the use of saturated color can add a level of whimsicality to the scene. Since this is an iconic project, let's have some fun with the notion of iconicism. I have chosen an empty McDonald's French fry box as a subtle but powerful prop to allow whimsicality to dominate an otherwise rather somber environment. This was modeled easily in Rhino and has a bitmap of the McDonald's logo applied to the diffuse channel with a UVW map to properly fit. By placing the object at about 1/3 of the width of the frame, we'll allow the viewer's eye to scan the entire image before noticing the most dominant object. As this renders out, you can see that by reducing the reflectivity of the surface, these colors become more pronounced, and the prop becomes the star of the scene. For the Transcendence mood, I've chosen a dramatic one-point perspective reminiscent of the Shea Songliang photo. Now, rather than use a more predictable HDRI image to mimic the haziness of the precedent, let's instead examine how we can manipulate the same HDRI image employed in Whimsicality to create a compatible environment for the Transcendence. I'm going to rotate the HDRI image to try and locate a portion of the sky with less cartoonish clouds, and might re-emphasize some of the angles occurring in the architecture. You'll notice the water material I'm using catches some of the highlights of the sky and gives a nice shimmering to the surface. Lastly, we will take a quick look at how we can begin to mimic the lighting conditions of the Sorrow mood. Here we will turn off the HDRI lighting, and instead allow the scene to be lit with a single crisp spotlight. So far I've had the corrugated ceiling layer turned off, so that I could manipulate the HDR lighting to light the interior scenes, but for this image we will turn it back on. As I first enter the space, I will notice that my spotlight is placed rather arbitrarily. I'm going to adjust its location to center on a single Vosley chair, leaving the adjacent chair mostly obscured. Now, this level of crispness between shadow and spotlight is not representative of a real-world condition, but since I am going for a film noir look, I've deliberately chosen to keep the spread of the spotlight crisp. This is getting close, but I would actually like to play up the shadow as an additional character in the scene, so I am going to rotate the spotlight slightly, so that it will cast a long and eerie shadow below its neighboring chair. I can then adjust the color of the spotlight to possibly achieve a cooler tone to the image. For brevity's sake, we'll leave the demonstration here, but as you can see, the V-Ray real-time software allows a viewer to quickly manipulate material and lighting parameters to interactively change the psychological state through which a viewer experiences a virtual environment.